I wasn't even supposed to be there. Our neighborhood had a power outage that morning, whole block, all at once. I was in the middle of toasting bread and making coffee when the lights flickered and everything went still. Normally I would have just waited it out, but something pushed me to go. Call it instinct, boredom, maybe both. I figured I'd drive out to the next district, get gas, maybe hit the pharmacy and pick up allergy meds, then head back. Courtney was supposed to be out of town anyway, in the mountains with Riley. A girls' weekend. She said she needed to unplug. Something about needing a break from screens, city life, stress. I didn't question it. So there I was, a little before noon, walking through a strip mall I'd probably driven past 100 times but never actually entered. I just finished at the gas station and thought I might as well stop by the pharmacy while I was out. Flu season was coming early, and we were low on the usual stuff: ibuprofen, nasal spray, Band-Aids. Domestic little things. Life maintenance. The kind of errands you run for someone you love without even thinking about it. I wasn't expecting to see anyone I knew. Certainly not her. I was turning the corner by the food court when someone nearly walked straight into me. She was moving fast, eyes on her phone, and we both kind of jolted back from the bump. "Sorry," we said at the same time, almost in sync. And then she looked up and froze. It was Riley, Courtney's friend. The one with the always perfect eyeliner and the brutal honesty that you couldn't quite decide if you admired or resented. She looked exactly like she always did, sharp, stylish, unreadable. But her face went completely blank when she saw me. "Wait," she said, eyes narrowing. "Aren't you in the mountains with Courtney?" I blinked, confused, heart kicking up just slightly. "No," she said, "she was going with you." And just like that, everything shifted. Riley's expression changed in real time, from confusion to recognition to a kind of tired acceptance. She looked around, like checking for someone who might be listening, then took a half step closer and lowered her voice. "She's not with me," she said, quiet but direct. "She's with someone else." There was a silence that followed, not long in seconds, but long in weight. The kind of silence that drops right into your chest and just sits there, heavy. I looked at her, waiting for the follow-up, for the punchline, for the part where she told me I was being pranked or that I'd misunderstood. It didn't come. She just added, after a second, her new, "Well, you get it." And yeah, I got it. I didn't say anything right away. "What do you say to that?" "Thanks for the heads up. Are you sure? How long have you known?" Instead, I looked at her. Not at her makeup or her phone or the shopping bags in her hand. Just at her face. And for the first time, I realized she wasn't playing a game. She wasn't trying to hurt me. She looked like someone who'd already lost faith in both of us. Then she said something I didn't expect. "Forget her," she said, like it was that simple. "Have dinner with me tonight. Table 8. Urban Grill." I stared at her. Just stared. It wasn't said with flirtation or drama. It wasn't a dare. It was more like an invitation out of a burning building. She didn't wait for my answer. She just gave me this small, resigned smile, like someone who knew she'd said too much already, then turned and walked away. And I was left standing there, in the middle of a mall I didn't even want to be in, holding a plastic bag of cold medicine and a receipt for gas, feeling like the bottom had dropped out of something I didn't even know was cracking. The drive home felt like sleepwalking. I don't even remember how long it took or which route I took. I just remember the way my hands kept tightening on the steering wheel for no reason. Like I was bracing for impact. Like my body had figured it out before my mind had. All the little moments from the last few weeks came flooding back at once. Like some cruel film reel. The way Courtney started taking her phone with her everywhere, even into the shower. The weird glances at incoming texts, followed by her turning the screen face down on the table. The sudden excuses: "I'm too tired. It's just work stress. Let's do something this weekend instead." The way she barely reacted when I brought home her favorite pastries from that bakery across town. How she didn't even open the box. The way we went from cuddling to silence. From late night laughing to her falling asleep facing the wall. From good morning texts to me being the only one to send them. And still, I told myself we were just in a slump. That every couple has seasons like this. That work was draining her. That she'd snap out of it. Now I wasn't so sure. Now I wasn't sure about anything. I got home and sat in the car for a while. Didn't even take the keys out of the ignition at first. Just stared at the front door. The curtains were closed. The lights were off. It looked like any other Saturday. Inside, everything would be exactly where she left it. The throw blanket on the couch. The plant she never waters but keeps alive somehow. The framed photo of us on the bookshelf. The one from the beach trip where she made us take 10 selfies before she got the angle right. It would all still be there. As if nothing had changed. But I had changed. I sat there for a long time. The mall. The medicine. The words. She's with someone else. How many times had I missed it? How many times had I made excuses for her distance, her detachment, her avoidance? Had she even meant to lie to me when she said she was going away with Riley? Or had she just assumed I wouldn't check? No, it wasn't an accident. It wasn't some spur-of-the-moment getaway. That kind of lie doesn't come easy. Takes practice, coordination, planning. And I kept thinking about Riley's face. The way she didn't flinch. The way she knew. Like this wasn't the first time she'd had to clean up Courtney's mess. Maybe it wasn't even the first time Courtney had done something like this. That thought hit harder than I expected. I finally turned off the car and went inside. I walked through the hallway in a daze, set the pharmacy bag down on the counter, and just stood there. It all felt surreal. Like I was playing a part in someone else's story. I didn't call her. I didn't text. I just looked at the time. 6:42 p.m. Dinner would be in a little over an hour. Bourbon Grill. Table 8. I still hadn't decided if I was going. I didn't sleep that night. Even after the dinner, if you can even call it that. Even after the long, silent drive home. Even after brushing my teeth and turning off the lights and lying flat in a bed that suddenly felt like it belonged to strangers. My mind wouldn't stop. I just lay there, eyes open in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to every creak in the house, every buzz of the fridge, every passing car that lit up the bedroom curtains for a second before disappearing, trying to remember when exactly I started losing her. But let me go back. I ended up going to the Bourbon Grill that night. I didn't plan to. I wasn't sure if I wanted to face Riley again. Not after what she told me. Not after the way she said it. Like a confession wrapped in a challenge. But something about it kept eating at me. Maybe I just didn't want to sit at home, stewing. Maybe I wanted to hear the rest of the story. Or maybe I was just tired of pretending I didn't already know. I got there at 7:58. Walked in like a man walking into a courtroom. The host asked if I had a reservation. I just said, Table 8. He nodded like that meant something and led me through the dimly lit restaurant. Everything smelled like grilled meat and wood smoke. The tables were set with thick silverware and folded napkins that looked ironed. Riley was already there. She was wearing a dark green top, sitting upright, one hand around a glass of water, the other resting on the table like she wasn't in a rush. She didn't look up when I approached, just stared ahead, like she knew I'd show. When I pulled out the chair across from her, she finally met my eyes. No smile, no fake cheer. I didn't think you'd come, she said. I didn't either, I replied. She nodded once, like that made sense, then picked up her menu and said, The ribs are good here. That was it. No, how are you doing? No, sorry for earlier. Just straight into the food. I appreciated that more than I expected. We didn't talk about Courtney, not directly, not at first. We ordered food, and Riley asked me about work. She already knew what I did, more or less, but she let me talk. I didn't say much, just enough to keep the air moving. We talked about road trips, about how Bourbon Grill used to be a burger joint, about how she once worked at a bookstore and still alphabetizes her home library by author's middle name, which I told her was completely insane. She laughed. Not loud, not flirty, just real. At some point, the conversation shifted. It always does. She looked down at her plate, pushing a piece of asparagus with her fork, and said, You've known for a while, haven't you? And I didn't lie. I just said, I didn't want to believe it. She nodded slowly, like she'd been expecting that answer too. That's usually how it goes. There was a pause. Then she said, She started pulling away from you 6 months ago. Maybe more. That part hit me harder than anything else she'd said. Not because I didn't know, but because I did. I just hadn't said it out loud yet. When I got home that night, Courtney still wasn't back. The house was dark, quiet, smelled faintly of her shampoo. The kind she always said smelled like clean sheets and citrus, like new beginnings. I remember her laughing about that once. What does a new beginning smell like anyway? I thought about that as I dropped my keys on the counter. There was a message from her on my phone. Hey, cell service is garbage up here. Going to bed early. Love you. I read it 3 times. Then I flipped the phone over and set its screen down on the table. In the days that followed, everything started clicking into place. Like finding the edges of a puzzle you didn't even know you were putting together. It was subtle at first, the way she muted her phone during dinner. That started maybe a month ago. Before that, she'd keep it on loud, sometimes even apologize when it buzzed. But recently, nothing. Not a sound. Just a silent glow every now and then from under her napkin. I'd asked once, jokingly, "What, am I not allowed to hear your texts anymore?" And she'd smiled, a tight little smirk, and said, "No, you just get grumpy when it interrupts your stories." I hadn't said anything after that. Then she started taking her phone into the bathroom. Not just for music. She'd bring it into the shower. Said she needed podcasts to relax. But I started noticing how long she'd be in there. 20, 30 minutes. I'd knock, and she'd shout back with "almost done." Then come out with wet hair and this spaced-out look, like she'd been somewhere else. After a while, I stopped knocking. She started sleeping with the phone on her side of the bed, under her pillow. If I reached for it, even jokingly, she'd tense up. One time she even said, "Jesus, can I have one thing that's mine?" That was the first time I heard that tone in her voice. Defensive, like I was the one crossing a line. Kept going. She started skipping our Friday night movie marathons. Said she was tired. Said she had emails. Said she needed alone time. I offered to make snacks to set up the couch. She said, "Another time." I started watching movies alone. I brought home her favorite pie, peach, from the bakery on 5th Street. The one that sells out before noon. She thanked me, didn't eat it, said she was cutting sugar. But 2 nights later I found a receipt in the trash, 2 slices of chocolate cake from a diner near Midtown. Not even close to our house. One slice had a heart doodled on the takeout box. I didn't ask. I just threw the receipt out again. One night we were having dinner or trying to, and I finally said something. She was eating with one hand, the other hidden in her lap. I could hear faint buzzing every few minutes. Not loud, just enough to catch. So I said, as lightly as I could, "Can we do one meal without phones?" She looked up, chewing slowly, like she was trying to decide whether to be angry or amused. "You're being controlling," she said. I blinked. "I'm asking for 20 minutes of your attention. You're micromanaging dinner." That was the moment something shifted in me. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just said, "Okay," and went back to eating. And from then on, I stopped asking. She kept pulling away, and I let her. You don't notice how much someone has changed until you realize you've changed to match them. I stopped suggesting walks in the park. She said it made her feel like we were 80. I stopped playing music in the car. She said she needed quiet. I stopped texting during the day. She said it was distracting. She stopped asking about my projects. I stopped telling her. She stopped kissing me when she got home. I stopped waiting by the door. You don't realize how much distance has built up until you try to reach for them and feel nothing but air. That Sunday, I found a folder of old photos on my laptop. Ones I didn't remember saving, sh*ts from vacations, birthdays, lazy afternoons. Courtney with her feet on the dashboard. Courtney with her head on my chest, eyes closed. Courtney laughing at something I'd said off camera. I stared at them longer than I should have. Not because I missed her, but because I didn't recognize her anymore. She looked present in those photos. Warm, connected, real. The woman sleeping in my bed lately didn't resemble her at all. It wasn't just physical, though that changed too. It was in her voice. Her body language, her energy, everything was filtered, distant, managed, like she was playing a role she didn't want anymore. I didn't need more proof. I didn't need to catch her in the act. I already knew. But knowing and accepting are two different things. And that gap, that brutal space between realization and action, is where I found myself stuck. Until I wasn't. She got home before I did. That part surprised me. I was expecting silence. An empty house, maybe a text saying she was delayed, or that she decided to stay another night in the mountains with her imaginary friend. But no. When I pulled into the driveway Sunday evening, the lights were on. Her car was there. The front porch light had been switched to that soft amber setting she liked. The one she said made the house feel safe. Safe. I sat in the car for a few seconds, engine off, key still in the ignition, hands resting on the steering wheel like I was still driving, even though I'd already arrived. Then I got out, walked up the steps, and opened the front door. There it was, the familiar smell of her perfume. The floral vanilla mix that clung to the hallways, to the couch cushions, to the hoodies she always borrowed from my side of the closet. And the suitcase, hers, sitting by the wall near the stairs, half unzipped, clothes folded neatly inside like she hadn't decided whether to unpack or leave again. She was in the kitchen. I heard the fridge open and close, the sound of a drawer sliding, the clink of glass, maybe pouring water, maybe wine. When I walked in, she was standing by the island counter, phone in one hand, glass in the other. She looked up, startled, like she hadn't heard the door. "Oh," she said. "You're back." "Yeah." We just stood there for a moment, looking at each other like two people waiting for the other to blink first. Her hair was still damp, maybe she'd showered. She was wearing one of her oversized sweatshirts and leggings. Comfortable, casual, like nothing was wrong. Like this was just a Sunday night and I'd come home from a trip, not from the edge of a personal collapse. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. Standard manila. Nothing dramatic. No red ink, no underlines. Just printed pages, clipped together. I set it on the counter right next to her untouched drink. "What's this?" she asked, voice cautious. "Start with the first page." She hesitated, then set her phone down and opened the folder. Inside were **TS, texts forwarded from Riley. Not everything, just the ones that mattered, the ones that made things clear. There was a picture of 2 tickets, not plane, but a scenic train route up north. The kind that winds through pine-covered hills and ends at some overpriced spa resort. Departure, Friday morning. 2 passengers. Reserved under a name that wasn't mine. Next, a hotel booking confirmation. Cozy boutique place, couples package, king suite, champagne upon arrival. Again 2 names. Again not mine. Then a photo. A mirror selfie from the hotel bathroom, captioned, "Made it, kiss mark." And in the reflection behind her, unmistakable. A man's silhouette, bare shoulders, beard, holding a toothbrush. I didn't look at her as she read. I just watched her hands. She turned each page slowly, like she wasn't sure if she wanted to see what came next. By the time she got to the last one, she was completely still. Not crying, not shaking, just frozen. "It's not what you think," she said softly. And that line made something in me snap, quietly. I didn't yell, didn't scoff, just looked at her and said, "Then tell me what it is." She opened her mouth, closed it, took a breath like she was about to dive underwater, then finally said, "It's been a hard year." I didn't reply. "I've been under a lot of pressure," she went on. "Work's been insane, and things between us, they haven't been easy." "So you cheated," I said. No tone, just a statement. I didn't mean for it to happen. That sentence. I've never understood that sentence. Like she tripped and fell into his hotel room. Like it was some kind of accident. A slip-up, like forgetting to lock the door or knocking over a glass of water. I picked up the folder again and pulled out the second booking confirmation. Same hotel. Different weekend. Same man's name. This wasn't a one-time thing, I said. This was planned. She didn't deny it. Instead, she looked down at her hands. fingers curled around the edge of the counter like it was the only thing holding her up, and said, "I was tired. I needed something that felt different." I let that sit between us for a moment. Then I said, "You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice." She sniffled, not crying, not yet, just the beginning of it. "I didn't want to hurt you, but you knew you would." Silence again, and then the classic pivot. "Are we really going to throw everything away over this?" I had to look away for a second, had to steady myself. "Everything?" I asked. "You already did." Her shoulders tensed. I could feel her preparing for a fight, ready to shift the blame, ready to say something about how I hadn't been emotionally available, or how I'd stopped doing the little things, or how the spark had faded. Instead, she said, "It didn't mean anything." That line again. And again I called it out. "It meant enough for you to lie, to plan, to cover your tracks, to look me in the face and tell me you were going on a trip with Riley." I panicked. "No," I said, quiet but sharp. "You calculated." That broke her composure. The tears came now, not sobbing, not hysterical, but steady. She wiped at her cheeks like it surprised her, like she didn't think she'd get emotional. "I didn't expect you to find out," she whispered. And there it was, the real truth. Not regret, not remorse, just the fear of getting caught. After that, I didn't say much more. I left the folder on the table and walked out of the kitchen. She didn't follow. Maybe she was too stunned. Maybe she thought if she stayed quiet, I'd cool off and pretend it never happened. But I didn't cool off. I went to the guest room, closed the door, locked it, and I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, not thinking, just absorbing. It's a strange thing, realizing your relationship has an expiration date, and that you're already past it. You expect heartbreak to feel like screaming or throwing things. But for me, it felt more like an engine dying. Quiet, slow, like something just shut off inside me, and all that was left was the echo. I stayed in that room the rest of the night. I didn't hear her moving. Didn't know if she was packing or crying or texting him. I didn't check. I didn't want to know. In the morning, she left early. I heard the front door open and close, keys jingling. The low whir of her car engine as it started. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't leave a note. I stood at the window and watched her drive away. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the pull to chase her. I just stood there, watching the taillights disappear around the corner, thinking, this is what the end looks like. Not fireworks, not screaming, just someone leaving and you letting them. Later that day, I called my bank, canceled the joint credit card. I opened a new checking account, started rerouting my paycheck, booked a consultation with a lawyer I'd bookmarked months ago. Back when I first had the gut feeling that something was wrong. Back when I didn't want to believe it, but saved the number anyway, just in case. I wasn't acting out of rage. I was just done. And there's a strange clarity that comes with that. When you stop hoping, you start moving. When the person you loved becomes the person who betrayed you, the whole structure shifts. What used to be your partner is now a variable to manage. A logistical problem, a legal file, and you stop asking why. You start asking how. How do I move forward? How do I get my life back? How do I become someone who survives this? I didn't have the answers yet, but I was finally asking the right questions. After that night, I stopped arguing with her. Not out of mercy, not out of peace, just strategy. I realized something sitting on the edge of that guest bed with the door locked and the air heavy around me. Arguing was her language. Not in the screaming, throw-a-plate sense. She was too calm for that. But in the emotional fog she created every time things got too close to the truth. If I pressed, she'd deflect. If I questioned, she'd cry. And if I caught her red-handed, she'd start rewriting the narrative so fast I'd forget what we were even talking about. So I stopped giving her material. I stopped feeding the story. Instead, I picked up a notebook and made a list. Not a rant, not a diary, just facts. Cancel joint auto payments. Remove name from shared streaming accounts. Get a new checking account. Pull last 6 months of bank statements. Open storage unit. Find a lease, short-term, private, furnished. felt cold. Surgical. But that was the point. I wasn't trying to process anymore. I was building an exit ramp. That Monday morning, I packed a duffel bag. Just the essentials: laptop, chargers, 3 changes of clothes, toiletries. I left it in the trunk in case things escalated. They didn't, but I was ready if they had. Courtney came back around noon. I didn't ask where she'd been. She didn't say. She walked in with that same low-energy guilt I'd come to recognize. Slumped shoulders, messy ponytail. The kind of face you wear when you want someone to feel sorry for you but not ask questions. I was at the kitchen table, laptop open, sorting documents. "Can we talk?" she asked. I didn't look up. "Write it down." She blinked, confused. "What?" "If it's about feelings, write it. If it's about logistics, we can talk now." There was a long pause. Then she said, "You're being cruel." And I finally looked at her. "No," I said. "Cruel was what you did behind my back. This is a boundary." She didn't respond, just turned and walked upstairs, quietly, like a ghost trying not to disturb the living. That became the new rhythm of the house, parallel lives. I slept in the guest room. She stayed in the master. We crossed paths in the kitchen like co-workers who used to be friends but now avoided eye contact. I cooked for one. She ordered delivery. She left early. I came back late. We didn't fight. We didn't flirt. We didn't exist to each other. And honestly, it was cleaner that way. I changed the Wi-Fi password. That was petty, sure. But it was also practical. Our account was under my name and I didn't feel like subsidizing her 2 a.m. FaceTime calls or whatever private browsing tabs she thought I couldn't see. When she asked about it, I just said, "New account. I'll share the password once we have a financial agreement." She rolled her eyes like I was being immature. But I didn't flinch. Because here's the thing. Once you stop trying to save someone, you start saving yourself. I set up new email filters. Forwarded important bills. Switched my primary contacts over. Blocked her on social media, not out of spite, but because I didn't need to see what version of herself she was marketing to the world. In private, she was still trying to bait me. She'd leave half-finished conversations hanging in the air. "Maybe if you had just been more. Do you even care how I'm feeling right now? This doesn't have to be like this." I let them all go. Didn't engage. No arguments. No apologies. No rehearsed breakdowns at midnight. Instead, I replied with logistics. "Do you need a copy of the lease application? Your packages are on the bench. Let me know when you plan to pick up your things." She hated it. I could see it. Every time I kept my tone flat, every time I redirected the conversation to something practical, it chipped away at her control. Because emotional chaos was her currency. And I wasn't spending any more. By the end of that week, I had signed a lease for a small month-to-month unit across town. Nothing fancy, 1 bedroom, enough space to think. I didn't move in right away. I still needed time to untangle the financial knots we'd tied over the years. But knowing I had somewhere to go made all the difference. I also got a storage unit. Started packing things quietly, methodically. Not in a dramatic way, just clearing out what I knew was mine. Old tools, personal photos, childhood keepsakes. Things I didn't want to leave behind when the conversation finally turned legal. She noticed, of course. "You're acting like this is already over," she said one morning. "It is," I said. "No, it's not," she snapped. "We haven't even tried to fix anything. You made sure of that the moment you booked a couple's suite with someone else." That shut her down again. She kept trying to reset the dynamic, to find some version of us that still worked. But it was all transactional now. She asked me to help fix the garbage disposal. I sent her a plumber's number. She asked if I could pick up her prescription while I was out. I told her to download the pharmacy app. She asked if we could just talk. "Write it down," I said again. She never did. That Friday, I walked in after work and found her sitting at the kitchen table. Same chair where I'd left the folder. This time, the folder was gone. In its place was a small notepad and a pen. "I wrote it down," she said. I nodded, sat across from her. But I didn't pick up the notepad. "Do you want to read it?" she asked. "No." That stunned her. I could tell. She'd expected the gesture to count for something, to soften me. She said, "You asked me to." "No," I corrected. "I gave you a way to communicate without manipulation. You're being cold." I didn't respond. She picked up the pad, flipped to the first page. "I said I was sorry." "I know. And that I take responsibility." "Do you?" Her eyes narrowed. "Yes." "Then why are you still sleeping in our bed?" That caught her off guard. She didn't answer. I stood up. "This is the last week," I said. "After that, I'll be moving out. I'd prefer we sort the paperwork before then." She looked like she wanted to protest, but I walked away. Not fast, not loud, just done. The next morning, I found a list taped to the fridge. A typed list, items she was claiming. Furniture, dishes, some art prints we'd bought during a trip upstate. I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because we were finally speaking the same language. A language of facts. I took a red pen and crossed off 3 things, the ones I wasn't willing to give up, then taped the paper back. No messages, no comments, just edits. She updated the list later that night and left it on the counter. We were finally negotiating like strangers, and it worked. By the end of the second week, we had clear timelines. I would vacate the house within 2 weeks of the financial split. She would retain the mortgage, her name, her problem. I would collect my belongings from the garage and guest room by Sunday. She would cancel the utilities under my name by month's end. It was clinical, boring, but it gave me back something I hadn't had in months. Control. I moved through the house like a tenant now. My toothbrush in a travel case. My food labeled in a bag. My clothes folded in a suitcase that lived next to the door. She hated that part the most, the finality of it. "You're really leaving?" she said once, almost like a question. "I left the moment you walked off that train with another man," I said. She didn't reply, and that silence, that vacuum where her excuses used to live, told me everything I needed to know. She never expected consequences. She expected collapse, drama, rage, forgiveness on a loop. What she got instead was space, and space reveals everything. The night after I moved out, I drove for a long time. No destination, no GPS, just roads, open windows, cold air on my face. I think I just needed to hear something other than her voice in my head. When I finally stopped, it was just outside the city, a gas station off Route 7. I bought a bottle of water and a cheap sandwich I didn't eat. Sat in the car for another hour. Didn't cry, didn't scream. Just sat there watching the lights blink above the pumps. There's this strange moment, right after you walk away from something broken, before you've started anything new, where you exist in between. Not who you were, not yet who you'll be, just weightless. I think that's where I was that night, in the waiting room between heartbreak and healing. And it was quiet there, so quiet it almost felt like peace. I didn't go straight to the apartment I'd rented. I stayed with my brother for a few days, slept on his couch, woke up sore and grateful. He didn't ask for details, didn't need to. He just handed me a beer, turned on the game, and made space for me in the silence. On the 3rd night, he said, "You doing okay?" I shrugged. "I'm doing." That's a start. He wasn't wrong. When I finally moved into the new place, it felt smaller than I remembered. Not in a bad way, just real, honest. 1 bedroom, tiny kitchen, a couch I bought secondhand off some guy who smelled like cigars and sadness. The coffee table was a storage bin flipped upside down. The mattress sat directly on the floor, but it was mine. No shared Wi-Fi passwords, no unreadable moods, no bathroom shelves full of products I wasn't allowed to touch. Just my keys, my mail, my space. And it was enough. I didn't tell many people. Not right away. A couple friends from work knew something was off. I'd been coming in early, leaving late, skipping group lunches. One of them, Dave, invited me to grab a beer after hours. I almost said no. Then I remembered what Riley said. Forget her. So I said yes. We sat at some sports bar near the office. Loud music, cheap drinks, screens on every wall. I stared into my pint glass more than I talked, but it felt good just being somewhere that wasn't weighed down by memory. That's when she walked in. Riley, wearing a black denim jacket over a dress, hair pulled back, face open in a way I hadn't seen since that day at the mall. She caught my eye from across the room and did this little wave, like she hadn't expected to see me but wasn't surprised either. Dave looked over. "You know her?" "Kind of," I said. "It's complicated." He raised an eyebrow but didn't push. A few minutes later, Riley walked over. Not shy, not flirty, just present. "Hey," she said. "Hey." She glanced at Dave. "Mind if I steal him for a second?" He looked at me for confirmation. I nodded. He smiled and slid away like he'd just won a bet. We sat at the corner booth, both leaning forward just enough to hear over the noise. She didn't ask how I was. Didn't bring up Courtney. She just said, "I figured I'd see you eventually." I smiled, a little. "You were right. What brings you here?" "Beer. Avoidance. The usual." She laughed. "You still thinking about her?" "No." She looked at me for a second, really looked, and said, "Good." Then she asked if I was hungry. We didn't call it a date. It didn't feel like one. There were no fireworks, no tension, just two people eating at the same table, asking questions that actually had answers. Riley asked about my work, about where I grew up, about whether I liked my coffee black or not. I do. About my favorite time of year. Fall. Specifically October, when the trees go gold and the air smells like endings. She didn't check her phone once. Didn't deflect. Didn't overshare. Didn't fill the space with fake laughter. She just listened and responded like a person. When the check came, she didn't reach for her purse in that performative way people do on dates. She just looked at me and said, "I've got the tip." And for some reason, that made the breath in my chest loosen. Not everything had to be a game. We saw each other again 2 days later. I invited her to the apartment, warned her it was still mostly boxes and hand-me-downs. She said, "As long as there's coffee." There was. We sat on the floor, backs against the wall, mugs in hand, sun pouring through the window like something holy. She asked if I missed the house. I thought about it. Then I said, "No, just the idea of it." She nodded. "That's the hardest part, huh? Grieving something that wasn't real." I looked at her. "You knew, didn't you?" I asked. "Back then, before I did." She didn't pretend otherwise. "Yeah," she said. "I knew. And you didn't tell me?" "I didn't know how. And honestly, it wasn't my place." Fair enough. We sat in silence after that. But it wasn't heavy. It wasn't painful. It was the kind of silence you get when someone understands without needing an explanation. Eventually, she said, "I feel calm with you." I looked at her. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't trying to charm me. She just meant it. "Not like in a play," she said. "More like home." I didn't respond, but my shoulders dropped for the first time in months. And I realized I was breathing without effort. It wasn't perfect after that. Of course not. Some mornings, I still woke up expecting to hear Courtney brushing her teeth in the other room. I'd reach for a toothbrush I no longer kept in the drawer. I'd pause at the closet, forgetting it didn't hold her things anymore. But memory is a strange thing, it fades when you stop feeding it. And with Riley, there was no pressure to be fine. No need to explain the pauses. She never tried to speed up the healing. She just let it happen. She came over some nights, brought books, made pasta, left her phone in her bag and her shoes by the door. She didn't talk about Courtney, and I didn't ask if she ever thought about the versions of us that existed before all this. Because now wasn't about the past. It was about presence. One weekend we went hiking. Just a local trail, nothing ambitious. But it was the first time I'd left the city since everything fell apart. We took our time. Riley packed sandwiches. I carried a thermos of coffee. The air was cool, the trail quiet, the trees that faded orange I'd always loved. Halfway up, we stopped at an overlook, just rocks and wind and miles of sky. I pulled out the thermos and poured 2 cups. She sipped hers and said, "You know, I used to think you were kind of boring." I laughed. I am. No, she said, nudging me with her shoulder. You're steady. That's not the same. I looked out at the view. The horizon stretched forever. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was chasing anything. Or being chased. I was just here. And that was enough. Later that night, I stood in my apartment. Dishes still in the sink, one lamp on, socks on the floor, and realized I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for an apology. Not for closure. Not for a second chance from someone who spent their first one burning the bridge behind them. I had stopped hoping for return, and started making room for replacement. Not as a rebound, not as a distraction, but as something real, something quiet, something honest. It didn't have a name yet, but it had a face. And her name was Riley. She showed up with a lawyer. Not for mediation, for leverage. She wanted to renegotiate everything. Assets, timing, even my lease. Said I'd blindsided her. I handed her a folder with signed documents, financial statements, and proof of my requests. All ignored. This is betrayal, she snapped. No, I said. This is a boundary. She cried, shouted, accused me of being cold, of giving up. I didn't react. I spent months reacting. Now I was just documenting. At the end, she stood in the hallway, eyes red. You'll come back. You'll remember what we had. I looked at her, really looked. I left the moment you walked off that train with someone else and smiled like nothing happened. The next morning, she picked up the last of her things. She didn't say goodbye. I didn't ask her to. I moved closer to the woods. Quiet place. Taller trees. Fewer neighbors. I started over, new job, new porch I built myself. New mornings that didn't begin with dread. Riley came by often. Never rushed, never loud. She brought tea, jokes, quiet evenings. We made dinner together, laughed at old sitcoms, left our phones in another room. She never asked for promises. She just stayed. There were no guilt trips, no games, no manipulation masked as affection. Just respect, the kind you don't need to earn, only maintain. I stopped chasing apologies that never came. I stopped explaining myself to someone committed to misunderstanding me. I stopped asking why she did it, because I'd found the answer in Riley's calm. Not in what I'd lost, but in what I finally recognized as real. Not a second chance. A first one I hadn't seen coming. And this time I stayed.